Welcome to the Good Fit Careers podcast, where we explore perspectives on work that fits. I'm Ryan Dickerson, your host. Today's guest is Erin Pryor. Erin is the Chief Marketing and Experience Officer of First Horizon Bank. First Horizon is a publicly traded financial services firm and a member of the Fortune 500. First Horizon employs roughly 7,500 people and has $88 billion in assets under management. Erin started her career with the New York Times as a news assistant and held her first marketing role with Matador Media's volleyball magazine. In 2020, Erin joined First Horizon Bank. Erin, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan.
It's a delight to have you on. So to get this all started, would you begin by telling us a little bit about what your job is like today, what you actually do, and then we'll go back to your early life.
As you mentioned, I am the Chief Marketing Experience Officer for First Horizon. I am responsible for really three areas. Marketing, which is a lot of what it sounds like. So the brand, line of business, really tying together the marketing objectives to the business objectives. I also have client experience and omni-channel enablement. So, how we show up and connect a lot of the channels together that really are the totality of the client experience. Every day is different, which is part of what I love, but it's really been a pleasure. I've been in the role for a little over 3 years.
That's awesome. And it sounds like it's much more broad than one might assume, a Chief Marketing and Experience Officer might be. You cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, I think the role today is evolving. Marketing can mean so many things. And, I always joke, and I'm actually sincere, but I always kind of kid around with people. I'm like, everybody's a marketer, because everybody's got some experience in the space. I mean, we all have, there's a quantitative component and a qualitative component. It's the art and the science. And we all have some of it is about opinion and belief. And then a lot of it is about fact and moving things forward. And here I feel really fortunate to have the client experience and insights component, because marketing and the omni-channel, the CRM side as well, because marketing's role is really to bring the client into every conversation. How are we also doing what's right for the business, and how are we doing what's right for the client, and how are we communicating, and how are we bringing all the great work that the sales teams are out there doing every day into all of the other channels and connecting them into the some of the online channels to create the offline online experience. So there's just a lot there, and so I think it's an exciting time to be in the space.
Indeed. To set the stage and to help the audience get to know who you are as a person and not just a professional, would you bring us back to perhaps what you were like as a kid and tell us a little bit about what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I feel like that's a trick question. I feel like there's been so many different things. I was a collegiate athlete. I've been playing sports my entire life. I come from a family of athletes, so I think there's always been a healthy bit of competition in my bloodstream. Just kind of always looking to do something different. I probably was a little bit of a tomboy. My parents and I were joking about this recently. I have always had like a little bit of a type A piece too. I have like a weird right brain, left brain thing. I used to organize my closet by color, like even as like a teenager, and I remember people being like, "Who are you?" So it's like, so yeah. But I grew up in Austin, Texas. I was born and raised there. Spent my young adult, I guess, life there. As you get older and you start to say things like my young adult life, it's sort of like, what?
Who am I?
Who am I? But I had a really wonderful childhood. I still have great friends from growing up and that we've stayed in touch. I went from, like I said, Round Rock, Texas, and I played volleyball at SMU in Dallas, Southern Methodist University. I graduated from SMU with a degree in journalism and a minor, which not very many people know, in Spanish. And then from there, just kind of rolled with what was next.
Mm-hmm. Did you early on have a sense that marketing was going to be your path?
No. When I was a kid, I wanted to be all kinds of different things. I went through the phase of I'm going to be a teacher. My mom was a teacher. Loved what she did. She was also, ironically, a volleyball coach. She was my volleyball coach. People are always like, "How was that?" I was like, It actually worked out." Um, so, so I went through that. I always really liked science. I wanted to be an astronaut, and then I wanted to be a biologist, and then I was convinced I was going to be a doctor. And I actually went to college. I started off at SMU pre-med. So I've always had an interest in the science, and I'm the science and the English kind of side of things, the literature piece too.
That's awesome. When you were in school, was there a moment where, or I guess a phase of your education where it became clear what path you wanted to follow?
You know, I don't know. You have these weird memories where you're like, you can't, like, I couldn't remember all of yesterday, but you have these moments where I remember sitting in the dorm room, and another one of my teammates was actually pre-med, and she was talking about all these things. And I think it was one of the chemistry classes, and I was like, I am not digging this. And then I was like, no, maybe medicine isn't, my purpose. And part of it was, I didn't know if I wanted to continue taking the chemistry courses, but I also had just kind of was like, I feel like there's something else for me. I contemplated taking a drastic pivot into art. I loved art history and painting and all those things. And my parents, again, I talked to my dad actually this time, and he was like, you might want to think about, what are you going to do with that, and how is that long term? You're enjoying it now. Because it was one of the electives. I had taken a couple of elective courses at that point. I was in art, various areas of art. And so then I was like, well, maybe not. I was like, maybe I should look. I looked at business and I looked at journalism, and I had always had a love for reading and writing and all of the different things. And so I took a course in journalism, and I really enjoyed it. And so I decided to go for an arts, like a BA, a Bachelor of Arts, with an emphasis in journalism. I ideally would have liked to, at that point, had a minor in business, but it was my sophomore year, and I had gotten a little too far. And at SMU at the time, I'm not sure what it is now, the credits needed to get a minor in business were almost as many to get a double major. I wanted to finish on time. So I was like, oh, I'll go into Spanish. I figured Spanish would be a useful language, as the growing population. So I went that way. So that's where I ended up.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, bring us along to transitioning from education to your first full-time job. What was it actually like to go through that hiring process, and where did you start to work?
I felt prepared for my first full-time job because at SMU, as part of the athletic program and some of the other programs, I was involved in a few different areas while at the university. I did some internships, and I think those are incredibly valuable. I mean, one of them was one of my first ones. I did promotional stuff for Gatorade. Handing things out. So you're the boots on the ground, right?
Yeah.
And then I did a few others. I did a PR internship for the Dallas Cowboys. I did, one summer I worked at an advertising agency, and then during one of my senior years, I think it was a summer before my senior year, I did an internship at WJLA, which is the television station in Washington, D.C. I think all of that really helped to prepare me, so I wasn't super surprised. I had the opportunity coming out of college to play professional volleyball overseas, and I told my parents that I had always wanted to live in New York. I had been to New York a few times on trips with the family. And I was like, you know what? I really want to live in New York. So whatever happens, I am going to either sell my car and move to New York, or if my contract for volleyball comes through, then I will go play. And so I had gone on a full scholarship for volleyball to SMU. And so my parents had, my sophomore, junior year, they had given me a car. And I found an apartment through a friend of a family friend, like one of those really random things. that needed a subletter in New York. And I was like, all right, we're doing this. And so I sold my car and I told them, I think I have enough money to make it 6 months. So I will either figure this out or I will see you in about 6 months back on your door, probably asking for a place to stay. So I went to New York without a job and I just started applying, and it's so crazy how you realize your network has tentacles. My volleyball network, ironically, I ran into a woman that I had played club volleyball with her sister. And then she introduced me to people who introduced me to people who introduced me to people. And eventually I ended up getting a job at the New York Times as a news assistant. And I worked on all of the little things, little blurbs. I did the 2000 Olympic pages. I did the 2000 election pages, which was pretty interesting too. And so it was a really great experience. For living in New York, I did not make a lot of money. So it was also, you learn how to make it work. But that was my first job, and it was awesome. It was hard, but it was great.
I bet, starting at the ground level, that's exciting. And I mean, being at the New York Times during the millennium, that must have been fascinating.
Yeah, it was awesome.
What did you learn about yourself going from being a collegiate athlete and almost going pro to being an employee and working at a company?
It's a transition, and it wasn't an overnight transition. It took time. I had to really understand who Erin, the college graduate, the not associated with, the athletics, the moving far away from home, not having, the network that you grew up with, right there. Everybody's always there, right? I mean, everybody's a phone call away, a plane away, a drive away, but really just figuring out who I was. And that was hard. And it took some adjustments, and you learn part of that through your work. At the New York Times, it was meeting a bunch of different people from different backgrounds, and then I moved on. I did some PR coordinator work at CBS. That was a little more rigor, I guess, or structured is probably the better way to say that. When you're working on the newspaper, you could be doing a shift in the middle of the night. You could be there, in the middle of the afternoon. It's not every day. It was very fluid. That role as the PR coordinator really, I think, was my first true entry into, the corporate world. But you learn a lot about yourself. Every day, I still learn a lot about myself, on a regular basis. So, but yeah, it's been an evolution for sure.
As it is for everyone. Those first few jobs, the New York Times, Sports Illustrated, and then CBS, is there anything that you carried with you from those early jobs that you still put to use today?
How could I forget Sports Illustrated? That's still one of my favorite jobs. I skipped right over it. I should. I think Sports Illustrated is probably the role that I really felt a lot of growth in. It was a fun environment, wonderful people. I was the assistant to the editor-in-chief I was the editorial assistant to the editor-in-chief of, at the time, they had a Sports Illustrated women's magazine. So I just learned a lot. Her name was Sandy Bailey. She was super accomplished, and she was just really amazing. And so learning from her and from all the other individuals there, and then meeting so many great people that I still talk to today. I mean, as I'm thinking about this, I talked to a handful from Sports Illustrated. I talked to, I'm still pretty close with one of the individuals I met at CBS. And I think you just learn a lot about yourself at the same time as, you're learning how to be a career person or how to work in the real world. And there's something that is bonding about that.
That's wonderful. It looks like after that, you had a long, healthy stretch with Volleyball Magazine and Matador Media. And it seems like, at least from the outside, this is when marketing really started to click. Was there a moment for you when it became very clear that marketing was going to be your path?
It's interesting. I didn't start with Matador Media in marketing. So originally, when I was working as the PR coordinator at CBS for King World, I started freelancing because I just missed journalism. When I came out of college, I actually had a broadcast journalism degree, and I had some interviews set up with ESPN, and I had a conversation with a very well-known ESPN broadcaster that was, again, one of those random connections, like somebody knew somebody who knew somebody who was this person's girlfriend. And they were like, you should talk to him. And I did. And he gave me really great advice. And he said, Erin, you seem young and full of energy. I mean, at the time I was like 21, 20, I was 22 maybe. Here's kind of all the things if you're coming out and trying to get into the things out at ESPN, you'd be moving to Connecticut and all the things. And so I really went the different direction with the New York Times, and then kind of fell into Sports Illustrated, all things. So I still got a lot of the things I liked with the sports, but I missed a little bit of that, just the creative, the written piece of it. And so I was freelancing, just kind of on the side. Like I said, I was in entry-level positions in one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive city in the US at that time. And I was just trying to make a little extra money. And the company that I was freelancing for purchased a volleyball magazine. And they were like, hey, didn't you play? I was doing a lot of writing on basketball. And they were like, didn't you play? And I was like, yeah. And then they were like, well, we have a conversation. And then they did some research and they were like, oh, you were pretty good. And so they asked me if I would be interested in coming on board and being an editor for the volleyball magazine. And so that's really how it started. And so then I was working from home before working from home was a thing. I was 24, maybe 25. It kind of started from there. So I became the editor of Volleyball Magazine, and then things change and they asked me if I would move out to California. And I was like, okay, I don't know anybody there either, but let's do this. So there is a theme here. Apparently I'm like, okay, like, let's just go. And so I moved out there. And while I was out there, they had decided to make a change in some of the advertising marketing areas. And they said, hey, a lot of our sponsors and advertisers really like talking to you and working with you. Would you be open to trying marketing? And I was like, I don't know, I guess. And so that's how it happened.
How cool. What a fun journey. One of our past guests described that phase as being young and indestructible. And
I like it. It is.
Just going with it. As you moved into marketing, what were some of the things that you needed to learn, or perhaps said a different way, what are some of the things that were challenging for you to master to become proficient in your field?
I don't think I really became proficient until later, to be honest. When I was doing marketing for the publication, and they had multiple publications, it was very targeted. It was very different. It was a lot of kind of boots on the ground. The interesting part for me as we look back, and I honestly hadn't thought about this maybe ever, is even then I knew instinctively how to segment and how to look at parts of the business. And I think it's so important to tie marketing to the business, because marketing at times tends to be thought of as like a very creative and squishy area. I think that's changing a lot because of just where we are in today's world. But back then, I was looking at new segments, the juniors, like all the high school, club volleyball, was such an opportunity. And now, I mean, it's even bigger here in the States, but so did a lot of things there. And so I think I was able to make good progress I had the editorial background by working with that group to help align the content to who the demographic was. And then also just introducing into new spaces. But I was honestly just winging it. I have no other better way to say it.
That's all right. Was there anything that was particularly challenging, a specific skill or capability that you've found hard to really get a grasp of?
I think a lot of it's not hard, but it's a thing. And I think it's still a thing. I actually spoke on a panel here yesterday and talked about this. It's about building your network and the relationships. And so whether it's with the internal partners or the external partners, or at that point in my career, it was with, some of our vendors and advertisers and, all the different people, but you got to really get out there. And it can be hard. It can be tiring. And sometimes it can be a bit deflating. It's sales. I mean, I was selling for the magazine, And I think everybody who has done sales at one point or another can attest. There's a lot there, and you're trying so hard to move the needle. And sometimes without resource. I didn't have resource. It was me. Like I was it. And so I think that was challenging, but it also, it made me realize like I do have some grit. Like I'll get out there and I'll do it. And I even did one story. They asked me to do a thing about training like a professional volleyball player, and they connected me with one of the AVP players who, by the way, after this story is still today one of my closest friends. But I stayed with her for a week, ate like her, trained with like her, all the things. I literally thought I was going to die. Like at that point, I had been out of volleyball for a really long time, like at least 4 or 5 years. I was not in the same shape. So, but it's fun. You just got to roll with it.
Oh, that's awesome. What fun. Thinking a little bit more from a broader perspective, maybe a little bit more philosophically here, what does your work mean to you today?
Oh, that's such a great question. And there's a couple of different things here. I have been really lucky in my career, and I do call it luck. I mean, it's a mix of opportunity and luck. I think a lot of things are. I have worked under some incredible individuals who are incredibly accomplished, and they taught me so many things and have given me so much advice, and still all of them are in what I call my kitchen cabinet. And I feel a sense of responsibility to continue to pay that forward. I want to continue my own development, but it's very important to me to continue the development of my team and those around me. So I think that is one part. The other part is people always ask, well, you're in bank marketing. If you would have asked me 10, 12 years ago, probably I got it to about 12 years ago, if I would have worked in banking, I would have laughed. I would have been like, what? No way. And not because it was bad. I just was like, that's just not why would I do that? There's such a sense of fulfillment in that because it's not boring. And we all have financial needs that are tied to where we are in our life. And it's really about helping people. I know this sounds so cheesy, but it is what it is. It's like, it's helping people reach their goal. Like, what do they want to do? And we all have different goals. Is it, you might be saving up to buy a car. You might be, looking to pay all of your employees in your business, grow your business, buy a house, retire, whatever it is. We're all trying to do something, go on a trip next week, whatever. But we have the fiduciary responsibility as a bank to help get you there. We all have to have money to do the things, to have some of the basic principles of life, and to also our basic needs of life, and to also, do the things that we want. And so I do find a lot of passion in that, in looking at different ways that we can, enhance and delight the client experience to add value and provide air cover to our sales associates who are awesome and are out there every day working directly with the clients. And I think between those two things, those really, fill it up for me.
Well said. Let's talk a little bit about your current job. And I think you've done a really nice job of segueing into it. First, can you tell us a little bit about where you fit within the company as the Chief Marketing and Experience Officer? And then walk us through a little bit more detail about the work that you actually do.
Yeah, so I am on the executive management team. I mentioned the group of individuals or the three groups I have in terms of function is marketing, omnichannel enablement, and client experience. When I came to the organization, it was an interesting time. I came to the organization from USAA. So I had been in banking. I'd come from a startup bank into kind of a wealth management fintech, and then into USAA, and then to here. I started in December of 2020, and it was in the middle of the pandemic. The organization was out of market for a number of reasons, because it was the pandemic and everybody was kind of out of market. And B, the organization was going through a merger of equals. And so it was growing from, a $40-something billion institution to where we are today, an $80-something billion institution. And there was an opportunity to take the company to market as a new collective institution. The company had transitioned from, it was previously First Tennessee. It had, have top of market in Tennessee. It had expanded into the Carolinas. So when they expanded into the Carolinas, they couldn't be First Tennessee in all the other states. So I'd gone through a rebrand in 2019 to be First Horizon. So it's been a pretty awesome experience. There was a lot of support when I came in. I've been able to build an incredible team, which, I tell everybody, like, I can't do it without the team. I really truly believe in surrounding myself with people smarter than me. And I believe in challenging one another so that we can constantly continue to evolve. That was kind of the state of the union, I guess, or state of the organization when I came in. And so today, it's interesting in the evolution. When I started, we were building. I flattened some of the organization. I hired in certain functions like a head of digital marketing, head of analytics, in some of the areas that we didn't have necessarily a lot of subject matter expertise, and then have continued to evolve. So we today, I've got, like I said, incredible leaders. We've built out the team. We've built out the technology. I mentioned earlier that marketing is today really, it's an intersection of, the art component with the science, which is the data and technology. And so built out the capabilities, and we are leading in some categories for in our industry as a mid-size institution. So it's been pretty great. It's been awesome. I've enjoyed it, but there's a lot to still do.
Beautiful. Would you educate us just a little bit on the terminology here? Omni-channel marketing is something you mentioned early on. What does that mean?
Omni-channel marketing is all the ways we interact with things. So it's the human to human, the in-person. It is, you might pick up the phone. The phone today is also a personal computer and little device that you can get on and search anything you want. So it's social media, it's the website, it is just any way you're going to interact with the brand, pulling all of that together, interact with the organization. I'm pulling that together so that we can meet you where you are when you want us to be there.
Understood. Thank you for clarifying. Joining a company as a C-suite executive is a pretty rare experience. What did you expect it to be like, and what was it like in reality?
I didn't know what to expect, if I'm being honest. I was nervous. I am very open about this. It was important to me as an individual that this was my first C-level role. And I was very important to me to stay authentic to myself. I didn't want, as I grew into the role, to change who I was or how I approached things, or even things, that sounds so trivial, as like I wear sneakers to work and, all the things. Not all the time. I do mix it up, but, just things like that. I just wanted to stay authentic to myself. And
yeah, good for you.
That part has been relatively easy. I'm very direct. You can ask me anything. I'm an open book. I do not, believe in, I try not to play. There's a quote from Indra Nooyi, the CEO of PepsiCo, that says, it's one of my favorites. I hope she would be on my, if I could have dinner with 10 people, she would be one of my 10. I have so many questions, but she has a quote that says, understand the politics in your organization, but don't play them. And I really do try to, not that our organization is rife with that. I feel very lucky. The executive team is a wonderful group of people who work very well together. But, when I came in, I had written that down. I was like, okay, I don't want to get involved in that. And I haven't had to, because it doesn't really have it here. But I do think that's important. And so that's been, something for me personally, is who did I want to be in the role? As you talked about earlier, what was I like as a kid? How do you evolve over life, right? So I wanted, what was this Erin going to be? And so that was part of it. The other part was understanding I wanted to make a difference and be able to add value to the organization. And the executive leadership and, all the things. And so finding that stride, it took a bit. You have to do a lot of listening. And I did over 100 one-to-one conversations within my first 90 days, most of them via Zoom because it was the pandemic. And just, tried to learn and listen to about where were the opportunities, what were we doing well, who did I really connect with and, need and want to partner with throughout the organization. And I don't think you can, this is going to sound super strange, but I don't think it's best to go in without expectation, make the experience, because I think when you have expectation, you're putting your wants and perspectives, you're projecting them onto things that you don't know anything about. And I didn't know enough to really have an expectation, I think. And so learning once after I'd been in, a few months and, listened and understood a little better the state, of the union. Somebody once told me, and I actually do believe this, your first 3 months you're listening. And then at 6 months, you're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And then maybe around 8 months, you're like, okay, I got this. And that was kind of true. Yeah. And so I think it's important, just to go in open-minded. I was open-minded about the whole thing.
Oh, that's beautiful. Let it be an adventure and kind of take it as it comes. We'll get back to the conversation shortly, but I wanted to tell you about how I can help you find your fit. I offer one-on-one career coaching services for experienced professionals who are preparing to find and land their next role. If you're a director, vice president, or C-suite executive, and you're ready to explore new opportunities, please go to goodfitcareers.com to apply for a free consultation. I also occasionally send a newsletter which includes stories from professionals who have found their fit, strategies and insights that might be helpful in your job search, and content that I found particularly useful or interesting. If you'd like to learn more, check out goodfitcareers.com and follow me on LinkedIn. Now, back to the conversation. Let's transition over into you teaching us a little bit about your expertise. Something that I always find interesting is hearing it from people who've made it to the top of their professional world. Would you walk us through or teach us something that you have found to be particularly useful or high impact in your work?
I think there are two things that I would highly recommend. And I talked to some of the up and coming leaders, high potential, high performers on my team as well about this. I believe I was able to move rather quickly. I mean, I started in bank marketing 10 years ago and was able to move, or 11 years ago, and was able to move into a C-level executive at a, mid-sized and $88 billion institution within a relatively, shorter window of time. And I'm not saying 10 or 12 years is short, but a big part of that was carrying things I'd learned from my other areas in roles forward. Part of that was being open to coaching, like letting people show me how to do things and learning from them, those who have this great experience. I still learn a lot every day from the people I work with. The third is, and this is what I emphasize, when I was at the startup Opus Bank, I started there. I was offered an opportunity as a management trainee to rotate underneath the various lines of business. And then I ended up rotating under the individual. His name was Brad Davis. He had been the CMO of Washington Mutual well before it went into the final days. And he had come in kind of to consult and then had decided to stay. And I rotated under him, and it was like lightning in a bottle. And during that period of time, I learned the business because I had rotated underneath the areas of business. So I understood, at least to a point, how the business is operated. And then in that startup, I did everything as marketing. It was Brad and I really building that brand. And we went from a $750 million institution to a $6 billion institution in like a 4 or 5 year period, and really got to do a little of everything. Like the advertising, I did the line of business. So like your integrated marketing, working with your lines of business to understand the business, to listen to them, what their needs are, the field marketing, the digital marketing, all of it. So I had that exposure to everything. And that enabled me to move forward. Same thing when I went to the fintech. I wasn't looking for a role. It was United Capital, which ultimately sold to Goldman Sachs, which we became part of. I think it was its Goldman Sachs Personal Wealth Management or something like that is what they turned it into. But there, I ran integrated marketing, which ultimately was really the client experience component, the journeys. And I worked heavily with the product teams and the technology teams. So I got exposure to those different things. And then USAA came along, and I'm using these as examples because I'm picking these up as I go along. Whether you're in your same institution for a long period of time or over time, you pick up things in different places. USAA came along, and a couple of my mentors said, "We think you need big brand experience. You should do this." And so I said, okay. And I picked up and I moved to San Antonio. I was in Southern California at the time, moved to San Antonio. And I was very interested in USAA because it was digital before digital was a thing. It was top of the mark NPS scores and customer satisfaction and all those pieces. And I wanted to understand how it ticked. So I went and I did the retail brand marketing and there. And then that brought me here. And so what I think is critical is understanding how everything works together. I've had a couple of people, when I ask them, what do you want to do? And they say, I want your job. That's what I said to Brad Davis when I sat in his role. And he said, what do you want to help me do? I said, I want your seat. And he was like, you're hired. I feel the same way. And so I tell anybody who says, I want your job, I'm like, you're in. But in order to get that, I needed to have that experience, exposure to all the different points, because today marketing is, there's so many different facets, and it is, how do you bring that together to tell the story to the brand and to the client and to the associates? How do you pull the brand? Great brands are operational. They are built internally. How do you build that internally with your partners and then project it outside? And then also, how do you tie it to the business? There are growth goals. Like, you are a business and you are a partner. You are a shared service organization within the greater company. And so I know that sounds like a lot. I'm not saying not everybody's going to have to do everything. Like, I have never run a full paid media team, but I know how to do it, and I have been exposed to that, so that you just got to keep learning to understand the different facets. Because in my role is to pull it all together, to, communicate to the board, to the executive team, what we are doing, how we are adding value to the business, why we need to do it, and what value are we adding to the customers and also the shareholders. And that's what it really pulls up to.
Wow. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like to become an effective marketer and to lead a business, the connection between a business and all of its consumers, that broad exposure, being open without assumptions to go into all these different roles and all these different capacities, that composite, portfolio of experience lets you do your job well. Is that about right?
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said. I was chatting with my CFO earlier, like this was a couple of days ago. We were talking about something else, and she goes, I think we were talking about mentorship. And she goes, I tell a lot of my mentors that are at certain points in their career, if you have been in your role for 2 to 3 years and you need to move to do something else. If you have aspiration to continue to evolve within an organization or within a specific craft. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I'm not saying you have to move jobs every 2 years. It's just saying, are you expanding? Have you gotten an additional responsibility? Are you asking for the order? Are you raising your hand like, hey, I want to do something a little more, or I'm curious and interested in this because I don't understand how it works. Can I get a little exposure to that? I think it's so important to have the curiosity to get the breadth if you are looking to continue to move up, because as you move up, you manage more.
And as a manager of managers and an executive who leads very large teams, can you teach us a little bit about how you, kind of coach your team leaders to encourage the vital many, the people on their teams to rotate around? I think the example that I might give is that if as a manager you have this outstanding, fantastic team member who does their job so beautifully, and it's been a couple of years, and it'll be best for them in their career to grow and learn and change, but you're going to lose that team member who does such a great job on that work. How do you coach your managers through that, what can be a painful but necessary process?
It's hard. I'll give an example even on my directs. I have an individual, super strong, came in, I hired him in a little after I started from a really great organization, another company. And he came in to run digital marketing, had heavy, amazing paid media experience, helped do a huge web relaunch, redesign, which was no small feat. He and that team crushed it. Has done excellent work. And I recently asked him I said, this is going to be a stretch, but I would love for you to come run consumer marketing. I know you don't have that business necessarily, the business background. He was not in banking prior to joining this organization, but I think it would be a great stretch. And in my perspective, it leaves a hole, right? It leaves a hole in one area because he has a great team. And what he has done well is trained his team well to be able to continue to execute as he moves into another area and we, refill that spot. Same thing for my teams. It's the same thing. For them is like, you as leaders, it is our job to continue to push the growth of our associates. And so if there is someone who can take on more or would be better suited for another area, it's our responsibility to set them up for success because that will ultimately set us all up for success. And so, I highly encourage if there's places people want to lean or if there's, opportunity for people to advance and develop, we need to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'd love for you to pick out one of your favorite projects that you've been able to work on at any point in your career. And what I'm looking for is kind of how the project evolved and came to be and actually played out. Would you bring us through one of those?
There's a lot of things. I am also, like I mentioned, when I say I come from being an athlete, it's competitive, but it's also competitive with myself. So sometimes I have a hard time being like, oh, I don't know, was that great? I think the Opus Bank, the startup bank, was a really awesome experience to be able to build. I don't know if I'll ever have that again in my career, to build something from nothing, be a part of it before it was actually approved by the regulators and see that.
Oh, wow. It was that early.
Yeah. So I was brought in a little before they had regulatory approval. And then, so I got to be part of kind of the planning. So that was pretty cool. But from just a straight up marketing at USAA, I ran a campaign. I pitched a campaign. USAA has amazing brand, has great branding. It's a wonderful organization with a fantastic mission and value. But there was an initiative. We needed to focus on a certain segment, and they had it for the bank, and it had never really run a full funnel campaign. So pulling all the sponsorships and brand, commercials and things like that, the brand work down fully into the business.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what does a full funnel campaign mean for folks who might not be familiar?
Yeah, so it's pulling, like I mentioned, all the brand and sponsorship, some of that top of the, awareness type marketing, all the way down into product or whatever to the business. Because a lot of times those things, I think it's becoming less, but typically it's brand and then it's line of business, right? And so there is more of a handoff today because of how people, the pandemic really changed how people shop and people interact. So I think things are continuing to evolve. But so we ran a campaign. We sponsored Chris Young, who's a country music artist. We did a heavy up in 5, meaning heavy up, meaning extra paid media, extra like billboards, all the things in 5 markets, and one was San Diego, one was like outside of Atlanta, a couple like in the Northeast. And it was a test to see, well, from the bank, not the brand. USAA as a brand is very well known, but the bank at the time was not as well known, even within, that military, the military target that's who they serve. And so we did this campaign and we did the whole thing we did the paid media, all the brand work, the sponsorship of that tour. We did lead generation and experience components and pulled it all the way down into product from a measurement perspective. And we spent, it wasn't a huge spend. And the results we saw were incredible. And it was a huge testament to my team and my partners there, because when I first started pitching it, everybody was like, are you really going to do that? Like, what do you mean? It just seems hard, a little complicated. But we were able to make so much progress and to show the result. And I'm just really proud of that team in that work. It's a small example, but it was just a way, like I said, marketing is a shared service, and you've got to and there's multiple components to marketing. So you got to get all your internal partners and your external partners and everybody at the table and aligned and moving. And I don't know, I'm really proud of that work still today. And here we've built a lot from scratch. And there are times here at First Horizon where the team and I will look and I'm like, the fact that we'll be having a conversation about something relatively, complex. I'm like, I can't even believe we're having this conversation in such a short period of time. So, we built the capabilities and the technology to really do some things that, a lot of times institutions of our size may not be capable to do. And so I'm really, again, but it's not me, it's the team too. And, the leaders, you get leadership support and all the things. So it's been fun.
That's wonderful. As we think about perceptions and perhaps misconceptions, misperceptions, how do you believe that the world sees chief marketing officers?
Oh, that's a loaded question. When people think of marketing, there's so many different areas. I think you can get at so many different answers. I think those who are doing marketing and have figured out ways to storytell around the qualitative and pull into the quantitative, I think are seeing more long-term success. I do think the role is evolving because, marketing and sales work best together. Marketing is, an extension of sales or vice versa. And so you've got to have that really close partnership. So I think it's evolving. I think it's positive, or at least in my experience has been positive. But I think it's evolving into what it is. But I think it's kind of a mix, and it depends on what the company is looking to do. But I will definitely say, if you do not have the CMO or the equivalent at the strategic table, it is a miss, and you will not be successful in the space if marketing's not at the strategic table. Not meaning you not being not successful at the business, but the function will not be able to see the success as readily if they're not involved in the conversation.
Are there assumptions or perhaps misconceptions that people have about your work or being a C-suite executive or working in banking?
Ooh, that's also you got some good questions, Ryan. In terms of marketing, again, I think it's changing, but I think people a lot of times focus on the art, not the science. And it's a lot about, can you fix this flyer? Can your team make this poster? Well, they sure can, but there's a lot of other things they can do too. And, I think that, though I do believe that dynamic is shifting. In terms of the executive space is, I don't know, I probably had this to a point too. It's like, oh, they must have all the answers. They don't. Like, I don't have all the answers. And even, in my role, I don't have all the answers. That's why we are a team and a collective. And then in banking, I think I said it earlier, I think just some people have this perception that banking is boring. And it really isn't. It's fascinating. Just in general around the economics, like the business side of it, the economy component, the behavioral side of, our clients, like meaning like how people interact and what they want from their institution. It's fascinating. So I think that would be it.
If you were to set expectations for someone who is going to embark on a similar journey, right, and begin to move into marketing with the destination being your job, what sort of expectations would you set for them?
I didn't have expectations into my own job. Careers are not linear. Some people's are. Some people are. And some careers, like for instance, I'm going to take it back to if I had stayed and gone to medical school, I'd become a doctor. That's a pretty linear career. But there's a lot. I think it's be open to what's next. And if you really want to continue to, if your goal is to continue to move up and advance your career, find mentors and sponsors externally and internally within your company. I had huge advocates at Opus, at USAA here, just in my career, who have, United Capital. They've all that I found in really helped when I'm not at the table. They would, be the voice and say, she's got it. I do try to do the same thing for others, but it's like, you have to build that relationship with the individual so that they know that's what you want to do and that you're interested. And I do really believe good work speaks for itself. Do great work, and you're not always going to be successful in things. Like I say, I had a former manager tell me once, you just haven't failed enough. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, that just sounds weird. I was kind of offended, to be honest. And then now looking back, I get it. Not everything's going to work. Your plans aren't always going to be straight. And, the plans, what do they say? Like, as soon as the plan is written, it's wrong. But it's like, but if you fall forward and learn from whether failure is a strong word. So I'm not saying it's like fail, like I'm getting fired. It's just like something may not have worked. I may have done something wrong. I may have made a misstep. But we're all humans. Make sure you take it, learn from it, move it forward, and keep pushing. But I really think finding those mentors and advocates is critical, and being just being kind of, like I said, fluid, being open to you can't control it. There's things that are always going to be out of your control. So take care of what you can and try not to stress about what you can't.
That's great. We're going to talk briefly about being hired and how you approach hiring. Then we'll talk about the future, and then we'll wrap this conversation up. When you think about hiring for your own team, how do you like to approach it?
When it comes to hiring, I have a policy of we all have to get along and be respectful. And we want to be around people that we enjoy being around for the better part, right? You spend most of your time at work or asleep, so why be miserable? And so when it comes, to the hiring, I think this also comes back from my athletic background. You don't always have to be best friends with everybody on your team, but you all need to be aligned to the goal, and you all need to know the role that you're playing and how do you play it together, because you're dependent on one another. And so I look for team players. I look for team players with great expertise in what the need is, but that are also open to learning other things and are asking questions. I do find it a little bit of a maybe yellowish red flag if you come to an interview and it's like, is there anything you want to ask? And people are like, no, because I think I'm good. It's like, okay, so you don't want to know anything. Like, even if it is it's like, even if it's like, hey, is there somewhere good to go to lunch around the office? That's still a question. You're curious and you want to better understand. And so I'm not saying to just ask, but I do think it shows a lot about the interest level of the other person.
Makes sense. Do you have an ideal hiring process, or what you believe is the right workflow to get and evaluate new people for your team?
I don't know if it's the right or ideal, but so far it's been okay. For my direct hires, I involve my leaders. I involve my some of my directs. I also involve outside perspective from some of my partners, or areas where I know this role will need to heavily interact with, because I want those areas to also have a say, right? They don't have necessarily a final say, but if they're going to be interacting with this person regularly, I need to make sure that they feel that they're competent. And then, I work there. So far, I feel like I have a great team, and I'm very proud of the team we built here. As it goes down from the second line and third line, I really don't get in the weeds. I can't have my hand on every hire. So I trust that my team is doing their due diligence and having the right conversation. So I think there's a little, again, mix of, you got to go with your intuition. Look at the paper tells you so much. That, to me, the resume will get you kind of your foot in the door. Then you have to get yourself the job. and the resume or the relationship. And so I think it's about, kind of, it depends on the role, but I do think there's a component around just compatibility with the organization. Do I think the person is going to be compatible?
Yeah. Yeah, it's got to be a good fit. Last question on hiring. What might compel you to take a chance on a candidate?
Somebody who's hungry and driven. I will hire those people all day long. Like I said, you come to me and if you're like second, third line, meaning down my org, and you're like, yeah, I want your job one day, done, you're in. You're in. Because it's that type of mentality in just innate sense of drive is how I think is just the type of person that that gets in there and they will help you move things forward. It's individuals who say, what do I need to do? Like I will, if Brian Jordan, our CEO, says, hey, Erin, I need you to do this, and it might be something I've never done, I'll be like, okay. Okay, well, let me figure it out and I'll go do it. I love that mentality and the drive in that. And so, sorry, that was a pretty quick reaction, but I was like, yeah, it's that.
No, it's perfect. That's great. And the last couple of questions here, what are you excited about for the future, be it broadly within banking and finance, within marketing? What are you looking forward to?
I'm excited about where my current organization is headed. We've had some interesting years, and I think a lot of companies, my assumption is there are quite a few companies who feel this way in the industry and outside of it. We had the merger of equals, we had another potential acquisition thing, and then we ended up, you've had a bunch of economic cycle, just inconsistencies, if you will. And I think that we are now at a point where we are operating as First Horizon for the foreseeable future. We are building, we are growing, and the people here are just amazing. Like I love the people I work with; they're just fantastic, and it's throughout the entire organization. So I'm really excited about kind of where we're headed as an institution. I think in terms of just in general, I think there's a lot of unknown. I think we're in a period of unknown. I don't know. Like I said, you gotta, like when I said with the role and how do you evolve in your role, you gotta be a little open-minded and fluid. So that's how I'm approaching everything at this point.
Yeah, let's see where it goes. Erin, thank you so much for being so generous with your perspective and your time. Is there anything that you'd like to promote or anything that you'd like the stage here to talk about, or anything that we skipped over?
I want to say thank you, and this is not a paid promotional ad. I want to say thank you to you because I don't know if Ryan will air this or not, but I'm going to say it anyway. I was debating on what's next, and this was a few years ago, and I had been told by a mentor to always keep irons in the fire, and that you never want to be flat-footed. And so I had mentioned my time at USAA, loved my time at USAA, but I was like, I've done some new things here and I really need to update my resume and I need somebody to help me write my LinkedIn. And I did the search on LinkedIn for somebody like resume writing, and Ryan Dickerson popped up. And Ryan really helped me rewrite my career story into a palatable way that was also very searchable. And I started to get hits from recruiters, one of which was the recruiter who brought me to First Horizon. So I just really appreciate and I fully endorse Ryan's career coaching work and really appreciate all the things you do, Ryan, for not just myself, but I know you do that for a lot of people. And I think it's really important to help people kind of move through.
Thank you so much. You are far too kind. I am so very grateful to have you as a client. I'm so proud to see where you've been able to go and what you've been able to make of your career. It's truly incredible.
Oh, thank you.
Erin, thank you again so much.
Yep, thank you.
Our next episode is with Travis Peace, president of Novum Home Loans.
I'm always looking for curious people, because curious people are the ones who are going to find the root cause of problems. They're not just going to solve symptoms of the problems.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe for new episodes, leave a review, and tell a friend. Good Fit Careers is hosted by me, Ryan Dickerson, and is produced and edited by Mellow Vox Productions. Marketing is by Story Angled, and our theme music is by Surftronica, with additional music from Andrew Esperanzada. I'd like to express my gratitude to all of our guests for sharing their time, stories, and perspectives with us. And finally, thank you to all of our listeners. If you have any recommendations on future guests, questions, or comments, please send us an email at hello@goodfitcareers.com.